Recording on. Thank you. Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to the December 14th Early Learning Board meeting. To begin this meeting, as we always do, to remind us of our purpose, Iolani Leal will share the mission with us. Iolani?
Aloha kako. The Early Learning Board mission is to support children's academic and lifelong well-being by directing and supporting the EOEL for an effective, coordinated, high-quality early learning system from prenatal to kindergarten entry.
Thank you. We need to keep this in mind as we do our deliberations today and hear from the presenters that we have scheduled for this meeting. Our first task of the day is to make sure we have a quorum and to take attendance. Justina? Justina Acevedo Cross? Aaron Henderson is absent. Iolani?
Aloha, I'm here.
Thank you. Megan McCorston? Megan? Van Naki is absent. May?
I'm here.
Thank you. Peters is here. Napua?
AO here.
Thank you. Mari?
Yeah.
Carrie?
Here.
Melody?
Aloha, I'm here.
Thank you. We do have a quorum so that we may proceed with business. The next item on the agenda is to review and approve the minutes. It's presented from the November 9th meeting. Please take a minute to review them, and then the chair will entertain a motion to approve the minutes as presented.
Bob, this is Carrie, so moved.
Thank you, Carrie. Is there a second?
I second Bob. This is Melody.
Okay, thanks, Mel. Any discussion? Hearing none, we shall vote to approve the November minutes as presented. Justina? Okay, Iolani?
Aye.
Megan? May?
Aye.
I vote aye. Napua?
Aye.
Mari?
Aye.
Carrie?
Aye.
Melody?
Aye.
The minutes have been approved as presented for the November 9th meeting. Thank you, everyone. Item number 3 is the first opportunity in this meeting for public comment. Is there any public comment to be shared at this time? I don't see anything in the chat. And there's nothing in the chat, so we'll move to item 4. And I'm going to ask Yuko if she will introduce Jordan Smith from the Hawaii Appleseed Program to share with us today. Yuko.
Hi, good afternoon, everybody. You want to come up here? So today we're fortunate to have Jordan Smith with us today. So Jordan Smith is the Healthy Future Project Coordinator for Healthy Keiki, and today she's going to be sharing with us the Child and Adult Care Food Program Advisory Group Report. So thank you, Jordan, for being with us.
Thanks, Hugo. I do have a little slide deck that Kevin's going to pull up. And let me know if I'm too quiet or too loud. That would be really helpful. I appreciate the feedback. All right, we'll go ahead and get started. Thanks so much, everyone. Thank you so much, Hugo, for inviting me, and to Chair Peters for allowing me to speak with you all today. And to whoever put me at the beginning of a 2.5-hour meeting, I appreciate it so much. I'm super excited to be here. As Hugo mentioned, my name is Jordan. I am the Healthy Baby, Healthy Future Project Coordinator, which I will speak about in just a minute. But I just want to preface this presentation with my background is not in early childhood or child development, but in public health, which means I get paid to tell you things that you already know. Cover your mouth when you sneeze, wash your hands, eat your vegetables. But it also means that I'm really passionate about policy systems and environmental change and how to ensure that everyone has a just and equal opportunity to live a long and healthy life, regardless of their income level or their zip code. Thank you. Hi, Kevin. Are you doing okay?
Yeah.
So sorry, I'm a pretty graphic heavy presentation and all the computers don't necessarily like it to say. Is it okay to just bring up the PDF?
Yeah.
The slide or just scroll here?
So the slides that are being presented online are showing well.
Oh, okay,
Yeah, it's not blinking like that.
okay.
So if you want to, you can maybe use, mine.
Yeah, okay. You can share your screen.
Okay. Oh, I don't have her slides on my
Oh,
desktop.
okay. Let me go on.
Sorry, guys, appreciate your patience. They're great slides. They have most of the information. So I
Well, Jordan,
see them.
yeah, while we're waiting, I realized I did not take attendance on the non-voting members. So thank you for this little interruption that gives me the opportunity to do that. Dana? Are you
Here.
here? Thank you. Rochelle?
I'm here.
Thank you.
Okay.
Steve Schatz? Okay, Matt Shin?
I'm here, thanks.
Thanks, Matt. Okay, my apologies to the non-voting public members.
Oh. All right, we're gonna go PDF, a little low tech. Thanks for sticking with me. So you can scroll down to the third slide. So that's me. Perfect. A little presentation overview for today. So I'll speak super briefly just to the Healthy Cakey, Healthy Future initiative, what's been going on, and then get to the real core of this conversation, which is around CACFP, or the Child and Adult Care Food Program, and how we increase food access for young children. And then ultimately sharing some tools and resources that we've created, and hopefully how they can be of service and of use to you all. Scroll down to the next one, Kevin. Thank you. So without further ado, as I mentioned, Healthy Cakey, Healthy Future is funded by the Centers for Disease Control and Prevention and Nemours Children's Health. It's a statewide public-private partnership between the Hawaii State Department of Health and Early Childhood Action Strategy, focused on embedding physical activity and nutrition best practices and supports to support those practices into Hawaii's early childhood systems and settings. I'm gonna scroll down one more, Kevin. Thank you. Those are the best practices I've been mentioning. And Healthy Cakey, Healthy Future does that by strengthening cross-sector partnerships, utilizing a shared framework to pilot and scale innovative strategies, and then evaluate the reach and impact to inform a sustainability and expansion. Next slide. And so utilizing a shared public health framework developed by the Centers for Disease Control and Prevention, we looked at different opportunities or levers within our early childhood system to embed these practices and supports. And based on feedback from cross-sector stakeholders and careful consideration of factors like cost, reach, timing, and available resources. Next slide. We identified 6 opportunity areas within Hawaii's early childhood system that were really ripe and ready
I did see him here, because photos come back. But no, Justina. She said she wasn't coming.
Okay, audio's back. Okay.
Try the line, just.
Yeah, how about do this slide one more time?
Data on early childhood food insecurity specifically is scarce and inadequate, but what we do know is startling. Despite facing higher levels of food insecurity, families with young children often have access to fewer supports and services to access nutritious food. No other setting outside of the home rivals the reach that early childhood care and education has for young children with respect to opportunities for healthy eating and to increase food access. A 2022 national study of the Child and Adult Care Food Program found that the dietary intake of children 3 to 5 years old in early care settings were more nutritious on a single day in childcare compared to a single day spent outside of care. Against this backdrop, and through their trusted role in our community, PCE providers are essential partners in reaching this vulnerable population to increase food access, ensure that all of our Kinki and their families can thrive. Next slide. The Child and Adult Care Food Program, also called CACFP or USDA Food Program, depending on which circles you run in, is an important federally funded program increasing access to nutritious, well-balanced meals and snacks for an average of 8,200 keiki and adults each day in various care settings across Hawaii. CACFP strengthens the quality and financial stability of childcare programs by providing partial reimbursements for each qualifying meal and snack served. Next slide. Like many of our federal nutrition programs operating in Hawaii, CACFP participation is not without its barriers that limit equitable access. A 2022 study conducted by the Hawaii State Department of Health identified the most common barriers to program participation by DHS licensed and registered childcare providers, which included inadequate reimbursement rates, burdensome paperwork, lack of understanding of the program, cost and availability of food, retaining and training staff to administer the program, and a lack of low-income and eligible children. Next slide. Yet, when we come together, CACFP can be an effective tool stakeholders can learn to leverage to address food insecurity for young children. Inspired by the opportunity to understand and improve access to CACFP to reach more young children, the inaugural Hawaii CACFP Advisory Group, made up of local and national food systems and early childhood stakeholders, work together to share data, develop shared goals, and create resources to raise awareness of the importance of CACFP as an equity tool in Hawaii. Next slide. So, Childcare Aware of America works with states to join their local childcare data with publicly accessible data sources to visualize childcare programs in relation to indicators like food deserts and family poverty to identify gaps and target areas for outreach and CACFP expansion. The maps are presented alongside text to provide customized state story maps. So state stakeholders use these maps for analysis and also as a tool for collaboration and coalition building and advocacy work to expand the reach of CACFP. And so this year, the Hawaii CACFP Advisory Group partnered with Childcare Aware of America to create 2 Hawaii CACFP GIS mapping resources. Next slide. The CACFP story map and participation dashboard allow users to view federal nutrition program participation by Hawaii's various early childhood setting types and geographic locations, as well as through the lens of poverty, food deserts, and opportunities for equitable expansion. The text accompanying the maps provides a local context, highlights key findings, and provides talking points and shares directions for how to use the map. While this is a detailed mapping tool, there is a strict data security feature that does not allow zooming in to see the specific addresses of childcare programs to protect their privacy, nor releases the names of family childcare programs. Next slide. The story map also highlights 10 state-specific strategies for change to improve CACFP and increase participation across 3 priority areas: boosting awareness, strengthening systems of support, and shifting state and federal policy. Some strategies include recruiting and incentivizing CACFP participating providers to serve as ambassadors to boost awareness of the program, strengthen systems of support and technical assistance for CACFP sponsoring organizations to increase access for small center-based programs, and increase collaboration and align program policies and administrative rules to reduce administrative burden for CACFP sponsors and ECE programs. Perfect, next slide. It is our hope that stakeholders use these tools to inform decision-making on the continued strengthening of childcare regulations and systems of support for ECE providers that promote equity, incentivize participation, and reduce administrative burden. Next. So, whether you're working to expand access for low-income children, meaningfully engage families through large federal grants, set foundational state plans and policies, or roll out a shared services program, we all have a role in ensuring equitable access and food security for young children. What now? We would love if you would share these tools with people that you know in positions of power and decision-making capacities. We would love if you would use these tools in your planning and decision-making. And most importantly, reach out if you have questions, if you want to know more, if you want to figure out what your role is in food access for young children. I would love to talk with you about it. Next slide. And you have a website. If you want to learn more, if you've already forgotten everything I've said, it is on that website right there. You can view it via the QR code or the website link at the bottom. And that's all for me today. Next slide. Thank you so much. Any questions?
Any questions for Jordan? And Jordan, I'm curious just to know how the Maui situation has impacted the work you're doing.
That is a very good and thoughtful question. And I think about it a lot, right? How to phrase it. With like wanting to leave space, right? And respect Maui and like the right intense crisis that's going on. But like hunger and food access, like in my view, is a crisis every day. You know what I mean?
Mhm.
Like people are going hungry every day. And so I think Maui just put a spotlight on that. And especially in times of crisis, right? And that food access is most important. Those systems are broken. So it's like if we can strengthen those systems now, then they're more apt to work in times of crisis.
Thank you. Any other question? I don't see anything in the chat. No? Jordan, thank you so much for coming. Sorry for the challenges of technology, but that's part of life these days.
I really need it.
Yeah.
I appreciate it.
We appreciate it. Thank you for the information. Yuko, anything you want to add from your perspective in terms of the ELEL's relationship to this project?
So I think that I really appreciate Jordan and like permitting us to be involved in this project. And I think one of the things that we noticed were in some spaces, there are some public programs that do not participate because of the reimbursement rate, and likewise, a lot of the community-based providers too. So we do know that there is going to be an increase in the reimbursement rate. But I think as Jordan mentioned, continuing to provide the supports and see how we can help people access the program, and also continue to see what challenges they're experiencing in terms of taking advantage of the program, and then trying to advocate to try to close those gaps.
So those would be things that members of this board could be doing as well in their respective roles as it's appropriate. Okay, thank you. And we continue to learn about the breadth of support in our community that's both needed and provided. And one of the things that I'm struck by constantly is the need for people to, first of all, know about these opportunities, but secondly, to figure out how to navigate them in a way that allows them to receive the services. So I think in whatever ways we can be supportive of those efforts, it will be a contribution to our community. So thank you, Jordan, for sharing with us and making us aware of what's available and how we might do this. Much appreciated. All right, we'll move to item number 5 on the agenda. Lauren Podesky at Yuko's invitation is joining us today to share with us about the KEA and share, I believe, a presentation that was shared with the Board of Education recently. So Lauren, thank you for joining us. It's been a while since we've seen you. I mean, I know you've been in on these meetings, but a while since we've seen you in person, and we look forward to hearing from you this afternoon.
Thanks so much, Chair Peters, for having me. And thank you, of course, to Yuko for extending the invitation. We're very glad to be here today. I'm going to share my screen, and what I'm going to be focusing on with all of you today is exactly that, the KEA data. All right. Excellent. All right, if at any time you lose me, please let me know because I tend not to be able to see everyone. But what I'm showing you right now is the first slide that we're going to talk about relative to the KEA. Prior to starting about the data piece, which I know most of us are anxiously waiting for, I'll quickly provide some baseline information that for those of us who aren't familiar with the KEA, that acronym itself stands for Kindergarten Entry Assessment. And this came to us in the Department of Education as a function of a legislative act. And the request originally came through legislation in order to determine the developmental readiness for our students in the state for kindergarten. So the Department of Education, where I am the early childhood specialist, is responsible for the education of approximately 12,000 plus kindergartners this year. And this was our first implementation of our adopted kindergarten entry assessment. Our adopted assessment comes from the Johns Hopkins University, and it is in use in several states on the continent, and now obviously in use in Hawaii, with the stipulation that it is only in use in the English medium classrooms because it's an English medium assessment. And so what you're seeing currently on the screen is a state level breakdown of our KEA outcomes. And you can see that at the time of compiling, we had assessed 10,260 students. That has since grown because we always have children coming to us, and the language of the law is such that all kindergartners who enter our schools, currently in our English medium classrooms, must be assessed with the adopted KEA tool. So that 10,260 students is approximately 85% of our total enrollment to date. But it's important to note as well that, of course, this does not include our students in Kaiapuni contexts or in our Hawaiian immersion classrooms. This also does not include our Maui impacted students, the very large majority of whom were not assessed due to the ongoing context of Hawaii and their of Maui and their recovery process. And then it is reflective of some charter school data, but not all. In the original legislation, charter schools were afforded the opportunity to apply for a waiver. Many charter schools exercised that opportunity, but many others also chose to participate in this assessment. So what we're seeing on the screen are our state level outcomes. And what you can see is that the assessment itself is a multi-pronged assessment, and it covers multiple domains. So I'll hover over here first, and you can see the two content areas that are assessed on the assessment: language and literacy and mathematics. And then you can see two developmental domains: social foundations and physical development. So the assessment itself, as a multi-domain assessment, necessarily uses multiple assessment processes. So approximately half of the assessment is an observational assessment, calendars, in which the students themselves are likely not aware that they're participating in an assessment. The teacher is observing the children in naturalistic settings, being who they are in kindergarten. And then in the language and literacy and mathematics items, we do have some that are direct assessment. So a teacher asking a child a question such as, can you count for me? I'll tell you when to stop. What we are seeing on this left side here are the buckets or the categories that our students can fall into. And you'll see that they can be demonstrating overall readiness in a combination of all of those domains, approaching or emerging readiness. And you can also see that we have a scale score attached to that. So the students have an overall scale score that drops them into a particular bucket of performance. And then these scale scores also exist for each of the individual domains. So when we go ahead and take a look at what we're seeing at the state level to date, we're coming in at about 29.6% of our students, which is a little over 3,000 of them, demonstrating on the assessment in terms of their scale score. Next, we're seeing about 39.5%, which is a little over 4,000 students in that approaching category. And finally, we're seeing 30.9%, which is about 3,100 students in that emerging category, which means that the combination of their language and literacy, mathematics, social foundations, and physical development items all together are coming up with their overall readiness level. You can similarly see that our average scale scores across the state generally fall into that approaching category, hence the yellow color. And you can see as we go across in the table, language and literacy is our lowest average scale score, and then it cruises right along. There's a little bit of a tie, but not quite, just decimal hairs off between mathematics and social foundations, and then physical development as our highest scale score item. So I'm going to take you to this next slide. And what we're seeing here is just some further context. I always recommend when sharing this slide that we're going to need to take this data with multiple grains of salt, not just one, because we need to remember the small and multilingual nature of our state relative to other states on the continent. But these are other states that do also implement the exact same assessment that we are using in their English medium classrooms. And so I'm just sharing the overall percentages that they experienced, and you can see the assessment year right below. But it's also important to remember that these other states, we're talking in some cases, about 100,000 more children in their kindergarten class set than ours. So relatively and comparatively, we have a much smaller population than these other data sets. So there's multiple factors to keep in mind. That said, it's also important just to get a little bit of context for where other folks are implementing comparable KEAs. And what I'm sharing here are our charters. So you can see that we see some differences. You'll probably note some differing colors amongst those individual domains. But what I also like to point out is that our N's, our number of students, significantly different than our state level. So again, this is another area where we might not be comparing identical populations of students for whatever reason. And the sheer difference in number of students means that we're not necessarily comparing comparable data sets. You can also see that of the total charter population, this is only about half of those schools. And they're the ones that opted into the assessment. Many of our charters had a waiver. So what I'll share with you next are our district level outcomes. And as I go through these, I promise I'm not going to read numbers to you. What I'm going to point out is that you're going to see some differences and some commonalities from row to row to row. Okay, so as we start to look, you can see that this is broken down to the complex area level. And pay attention to what you start to see as differences. In some cases, you're going to see some pretty stark differences in those data sets. The first one is pretty stark in terms of Farrington and their average domain level scores compared to their neighbor Kaiser, for example. And so the reason we do this is because this helps us as the department to start to be able to dive in more deeply and to identify patterns. Now, what I'm presenting to you here is not interpreted, right? Beyond the application of, we're saying approaching is yellow, you're not seeing interpretation of the data set. You're seeing the data as it came to us from our internal data system. So these are the numbers as they are. Our goal is to provide that interpretation, but in the context of a technical report, so that we've had plenty of time to really analyze what this data is telling us and also what it might not be telling us, because there are multiple stories at play as we start to consider what each line might show us or not show us. So as we move forward, we're going to look at each of our districts, and you will see that they will always be broken up into their individual complexes. You're going to see their percent tested, how they fall into demonstrating, approaching, or emerging, and then the average scale scores color-coded there. Moving right along, we have our Windward district. You might notice, a little bit more commonality perhaps than in this previous slide where we're seeing a lot more fluctuation in score sets. So keeping that in mind. Much smaller N sizes as well with comparison to our previous. Here we're looking at Central. We're seeing a little bit, again, less fluctuations, but a little bit more students in packets of demonstrating readiness across those domains. For example, starting to see some larger N sizes again. This is a larger area, but it's also much larger geographically as well. And we're also looking at our Leeward district here. You're going to see differing percentages of students tested. This is always a great place as a reminder that our Kayapuni students, while they are also our kindergarten students and therefore part of our whole data set for our numbers, they were not assessed on the English medium KEA because they are not in an English medium context and therefore the assessment isn't an appropriate one for them. So that sometimes impacts the number of students assessed from complex to complex. Now we're looking at Hawaii district. I think it's all the way on for you. You might have to move the Zoom bar if it's on the bottom like mine as well. What you're going to notice here actually is we saw a little bit more consistency in terms of the outcome from complex to complex. We're starting to potentially see a pattern around language and literacy in general across all of our districts. And we're extremely conscious of that relative to the fact, again, that we're in a multilingual context. And many of our students who were assessed are multilingual people who likely have a lot of skills and knowledge that they might be able to demonstrate in their first language, but perhaps not in English yet. Now we're looking at Maui district. I always like to point out my special friend Hana here, because Hana actually, they jokingly call themselves English immersion because they have more Kayapuni kindergartners than they do English kindergartners. And so their English classroom is extremely small, and therefore it would appear as if their number of tested is quite low, but rather they are serving predominantly Kayapuni students with one little pocket of our English class. You'll see that a few students in Lahaina had been assessed prior to the Maui fires as well, but we're remembering that that data item is not one that is reflective of the reality right now. Finally, we're looking here at Kauai district. This was another area where we noticed relative stability in comparison to some of our other districts from complex to complex. Forward, please. Come on. There we go. Okay. Oh, it went forward without me. Apologies. So what we're seeing here to finish out our talk together is preliminary data. These are beginning subgroup analyses that we've been conducting. Again, interpretation is not the goal of these tables right now. Right now, we're trying to get a sense of not only the student outcomes themselves, but how at kindergarten entry our students are already reflective of our various subgroups. So what we're looking at here first are our special education or our students with IEPs, our students with 504s, and then our English learners and our economically disadvantaged students. And we like to point out as well is that these columns are not ordered in any particular intentionality beyond this is how they pop up in our internal data system. So as we look at these columns, just keep in mind, they're not trying to provide further interpretation for you. They are just listed. What you'll also see is the percent of the assessed population. And what that means is for each of the subgroups, how large is this population relative to our whole collection of kindergarten students? So as we're looking across, we are starting to see patterns emerge in terms of where students are landing in their demonstrating or approaching or emerging categories. We're also in the preliminary process of doing subgroup evaluation by our ethnic groups that are reflected in our data sets. Again, these are not presented in any particular interpreted order. They're in the order that they appear in our online systems for pulling our data sets. And the purpose in doing that is to ensure that as we're evaluating our data, are we remaining conscious of the unique needs of all of our students? Are we being reflective of the populations that we serve? And what we will begin to do in that technical report is begin to evaluate where our students are, how are we serving them, to what extent do we need to be prepared for expansive services, to what extent are we maybe concentrating services in one location versus another, and how can we foster an equitable experience? So you can see there are many different ways we can break down our KEA data, but ultimately the most important thing that we do with this data is support our teachers. So as we're thinking about the impacts of this data set going forward, our goal is for it to inform what our teachers do in the classroom, how our principals are preparing to think about serving future classes of kindergarten students, and what we at the state level need to be prepared to do going forward, particularly relative to the fact that we're a multilingual context in a dual language state. What are we not considering right now in terms of the education of young children? What should we be considering? And how do we need to enrich our contexts at each school site to match the needs of the students that we support? To that end, I am open for questions or any other information that I can provide. And thanks so much for having us today.
Thank you, Lauren. Are there board members who have questions for Lauren? Or comments, obviously.
I have a question, but I see Alice has something in the chat first. I think the question might be similar.
So the question in the chat, I'll read it first. Sorry about that. Is there a correlation between a state's investment in children and KEA outcomes? They have done some preliminary analysis in other states with this particular KEA that does seem to indicate that there could be a correlation. Correlation is not causation, of course, and it is a multi-domain assessment. So that does definitely impact the level of predictability in that regard. Similarly, it's important to think about where that funding is going and the context of the population that we're aiming to impact. So, but right now we don't have data relative to our own expenditures in Hawaii for our students in this present data set.
Lauren, will there eventually be information about students who have attended pre-K?
There will, yeah. Yep, it's a consideration for us. The data exists. It's not as clean as we would hope for initial data pull. So that is a future consideration for us as well. We can actually presently do some of that analysis by hand, which we're working on right now for that technical report. It's not causal. And one thing that we're finding in the data set is that many of our students might attend, as you all know this, they attend in one spot and then end up at a school. So tracing our students along their pre-K to K path, we have found is pretty messy right this second, but that's illuminating for us how we can clean it up so that in future we have better data.
Yeah, I was particularly curious because if we're going to measure ourselves with other states, how are we getting an apples to apples type of,
Yep.
comparison at some point? And that would be a factor I would think that might, whether it's causal or not, might have an impact along with so many other issues that socioeconomic issues or whatever it might be, that I'm curious how the data eventually gets used and interpreted by those who see it. So that was part of the reason. Carrie, I see you have a question.
I do, Lauren, thank you very much. That was very clear. Thank you for that very clear presentation. I have a question, I guess it's to the group, not necessarily directly to you. I'm wondering, is there a strategy or a plan or how other states take this data and work with their executive offices of early learning? So with UCO, our Child Care Business Coalition folks, HEIS, is there a way to take what we're learning and think differently about our early childhood investments and programming and all of that? So I'm wondering how this information and data can help inform EC programming.
Anyone want to jump in and try that one? I think there are some frightening possibilities for one thing. The potential of looking at the numbers in terms of what we're measuring and whether or not that relates to what we're actually doing programmatically may not necessarily be what's best for children. I mean, that would be a question I would want to see resolved. I look at the categories, and the social one is called social foundations. Does that include self-regulation? I mean, what do all those things look like? So I think if we're going to be utilizing this information, the first step sounds sensible to me, Ron, that either ways you can be supportive of teachers. So it's not a summative type assessment of a child, but it's more diagnostic in terms of, and that's not a good word to use either, but more useful in terms of this is where children are at. How does that impact our program? This is how I'm interpreting what you're saying, which seems a useful way to utilize that information. At the same time, it may not be assessing all the things that pre-K experiences are providing for children. So I'm just responding from an educator's point of view, not a policy point of view. But I worry that policy may result from this data if it's not carefully interpreted in a way that people know its limitations as well as what it demonstrates. Both of those are a little worrisome. And that's no need for you to respond to that. And Carrie, that may not be at all what you wanted to hear, but it just strikes me when I look at the numbers, I sort of take a deep breath because I think the implications of what they're measuring for the population we have just makes me wonder.
Yeah, and I'm not looking specifically to any sort of answer. I don't have a preconceived notion. I was just curious on how our early childhood providers are thinking about this data when they see it. And what is that process and conversation that's required or needed perhaps to help talk through what you just expressed, Bob?
Hi, this is Rochelle Mahoy. So,
Yeah.
I belong to Honolulu District, so that was one of the first slides that you saw the data for. I just want to kind of add to what Lauren has shared is this is our first time, right, doing the KEA.
Mhm.
So it was given to our kindergarteners in the first 30 days on walking to our campus. So I mean, implementation of the KEA data, I think will get better and more accurate. It was kind of challenging for our kindergarten teachers and some of them were new, like brand new and assessing kids. So I think the data will get a little bit cleaner, tighter over time. So this is really a first event. People got trained in the spring and again right before school started. So the data might not be the cleanest, but it is helpful information. And I think we're just taking it, like Lauren said, with multiple grains of salt. It does have, to look at any kind of trends, I think it's a little premature. And like Lauren said, what we really want to know, this is within their first 30 days of entering our campuses. So previous experience, in early childhood, what their early childhood experiences were prior to coming into the K-12 system, is information that will be helpful to this group and us in the DOE in terms of helping students transition, and then also looking at the best practices in helping kids transition, right? And what's developmentally appropriate. And so I think it gives us just a snapshot, but it's hard to make any kind of policy decisions, any kind of without, and like you said, with what everybody was saying, it's depending on our interpretations. But I think it's at this time pretty early on with this is our first go at it. So thank you.
Thank you, Rochelle. Any other comments or questions?
I just wanted to add something. This is Steve Schatz. I think I agree with both Carrie and Rochelle. Like, I think it's the first time, so we have to know that there'll be some stumbles along the way. But the other part I would add is, and then Bob, I think your concerns about whether the domains actually measure what we value is totally fair. But I would say the only way we do that is by having a conversation, right? Sit down, say, okay, here's where, we'd like to see more of this or less of that, or here's where there's a bit of a mismatch. But if there are things that are valued sort of universally, we probably want to know, right? If there are some areas in which our kids are coming in not as ready as we'd like them to be. And then that information is sort of useful in both directions for early care and education folks, but also, of course, for DOE diagnostically for those kindergarten teachers, right? Like, I think the main thing is everyone needs to know no one should be pointing fingers at anyone, but it's good to have information that we can act upon.
Yeah. And I certainly would agree with that. I just want to be sure that it's acted upon in a way that people understand both its limitations and its advantages.
Yeah, 100% agree.
Yeah.
And I would add, oh, sorry.
Little questions, comment. So they had 3 different categories: demonstrating, approaching, and emerging. So the demonstrating is, yes, you are ready to come to kindergarten. So the rest of the group is not quite there, and some a little more far below. So is this the same feeling that with or without this test, the actual people in the field? Is this a surprise result? Or is this something that you kind of know? So this is kind of confirming, yes, what we are feeling in the school is what is seeing in the data.
This is 100% anecdotal, but I spend a lot of time with our teachers, continue to, and our kindergarten teachers, I feel pretty confident in saying they would tell you like, oh yeah, and they're very accurate in predicting assessment scores based on very positive interactions with their students. They are already telling us like, oh yeah, lots of our kids need support, and we teach lots of children who are also learning the language of instruction while learning the content. And so I think our teachers themselves would likely tell you that this is very reflective of kindergarten. It's nothing that they are looking at and saying, oh, I didn't realize lots of students need support. And I would also just kind of reinforce that in spending so much time like directly training these teachers and working with so many of them across the islands, the conversation really was never about the perceived adequacy or inadequacy of their prior care and experience. It was more like, okay, so this is how my students come, right? For lots of reasons. It could be that they are all demonstrating. Wonderful. What does that mean for my classroom? So I feel like our kindergarten teachers are in a wonderful place to facilitate positive collaboration with our various support networks for early childhood. And that, you know, can include classrooms, center-based, but also with families and community that are providing early care and education too. So I personally see it as an opportunity for us to just really say, you know, what does it mean in our very specific context of Hawaii to see these kinds of scores? What value judgment has value here? And then what can we do about it together?
Rochelle, did you have something you wanted to say in response to Molly as well?
Sorry. No, I think like it's a great opportunity. It's good information. I think, yeah, I mean, to be honest, I mean, if you look at Honolulu districts, I'm in charge of the one that's orange and the one that's green. And so it's very interesting in terms of it, like, yeah, I mean, it's kind of where I might have thought people were at. So it does add different conversations, for sure. But I do feel like, I mean, information, like Steve said, it's good information. It's points of conversation. But it's, you know, we have to look at multiple data points and observation and qualitative data, but it's helpful. Thanks.
Thanks. Iolani.
Aloha. I just have I guess a comment. I'm still struggling with understanding the value of the data. I understand that it was required to be implemented, but I'm still having a hard time making that connection to how this data will really be useful. Particularly because I know we're focusing a lot on the teacher, you know, being able to kind of adjust to what the incoming students, where they're at. I'm pretty sure that the majority of kindergarten teachers did that without a standardized assessment. So I understand that we're getting data, but I want to know more about how it's going to be used. And I think that was kind of the discussion. I have particular interest, of course, in the Hawaiian immersion setting. And I know I did read the report and it says that they are in development of some standards and things like that. I just wanted to say on record again that we do have an assessment. We actually implemented that contractually with a charter partner of ours for 80 kindergarten students this year, which was their kindergarten entry assessment. I just wanted to make sure that I'm being clear about that, even though the department is expending a lot of money on developing an assessment that hasn't really been worked on with Ahapuna Leo, which is the only statewide Hawaiian language medium early learning provider. So I just
I was
want to
under the
make sure
impression
that
we were meeting about that assessment together at some point. Again,
we started to, and I requested some data on how many students so that we could provide a proposal,
okay.
and never got the information.
So you need the
So
number
I
of
just wanted
students.
to, just wanted to make mention of that because I know that the process is already starting. And then could you confirm the Johns Hopkins assessment, is that based on typically what early learning settings look at or provide?
It was based on an early learning assessment that they had previously developed in early learning, so preschool through kindergarten. So they developed their kindergarten entry assessment relative to a previous early learning assessment that is, you know, I couldn't tell you the number of states in adoption of the early learning assessment, so I don't want to misspeak about that. But that's where they developed their standards for the kinder entry.
Okay, I just want to make sure that's clear because for the development of the Hawaiian immersion tool, I think it would be important to look at what children in that pathway are learning before they're entering kindergarten, which is what you're saying is done for the English medium side as well. I do not think that it makes sense to only look at kindergarten or what kids learn in kindergarten. But that's all. Mahalo.
Mahalo.
Thank you for that observation and comment. Anyone else? We're about to end this portion of the meeting, so I want to let poor Lauren go. If there's one more question or comment that somebody has that they wish to share, we can do that.
I just have a quick question. I'm sorry, this is Megan. Hi. Perhaps due to my past life and experience with the charter schools, but I'm really interested in the charter school data as a subgroup. Just because, you know, it was relatively higher. I think it's worth digging into a little bit, and which of the charters who participate, I know it's a much smaller group, but which charters actually are attached to pre-K programs or have pre-K programs of their own of those that participated. I'd be interested to know that. And did that have any direct, you know, correlation to those results? And it's interesting also in that a lot of the assumptions you pointed out, these are, even the non-immersion charter schools are by definition multilingual, multicultural. So it sort of blows that myth apart, right? That you know, you can't have high achievement in these schools. So I think it's just interesting and worth taking a look at, and maybe it'll be easier as a smaller group. Thanks.
Thank you, Megan. Lauren, thank you for joining us today and for sharing that data. It's really helpful to know, and we'll look forward to learning more as you move forward. And I think the advice that was given about remembering that this is a first time, and that it really is a beginning of the KEA, is one we need to keep in mind. So we appreciate that. But we especially appreciate your sharing it with us.
Thank you for having me. I appreciate it.
Thank you. Move to item number 6 on the agenda, which is the update from the Executive Office.
Excuse me, I have a comment. Janice Smith here from Hawaii Community College. I wasn't able to get in. I guess my cell wasn't working properly. Anyway, will there be an opportunity for continual? Hi. Yes.
There'll be an opportunity for the public to comment later in the meeting. This is really only the time that board members are allowed to speak, I'm afraid. So can you hold your comment to the public portion?
I'm sorry. Yeah. Okay. I apologize, but I just want to forum at some point.
That's okay. We will, before the meeting is over, we have a second opportunity for public comment. We'd be happy to hear the comments at that point. Thank you. All right, Yuko, can we move to the updates from the Executive Office, please?
Hi, good afternoon, everybody. Here's our updates for December. So according to the agenda, we have some updates on the budget and ledge proposals, BGB5 grant, and pre-K expansion. So, Jordana, just speak on this.
Hi, everyone. So just a couple quick updates. So I was not at the last meeting, I apologize, but I know that it was shared that we did receive the governor's decision. His decision did not include any of the budget requests for the position or the funding for the media campaign efforts. Departments did have an opportunity to appeal if we decided to do so, and EOEL decided not to. Since a lot of the heavy focus in the upcoming session will be to address some of the needs on Maui and some of the budget shortfalls as a result of the wildfires. So for this upcoming supplemental session, our goal will be to continue advocating for maintaining the budget appropriations that were made at the beginning of the biennium. So if anyone has questions about that, please let me know. And then one quick update on our legislative approval that was approved by the board for us to move forward with. So this was to amend chapter 302L 1.5, which is what we are calling our pre-plus statute. The goal of this was to expand those opportunities. So to expand early learning opportunities on public properties besides Hawaii Department of Education campuses. We are still working with the AGs to finalize the language and the formatting to make sure it's in accordance with law. So we are hopeful that once that process is done, then it'll go to review with the gov to make the determination if it will go into his administrative package to be introduced to the legislature via that package. So we'll inform the board once we get that decision.
Do you have any indication that there are any challenges in that? No, okay. Good, thank you. All right, you go.
Thank you. Alohi?
Hi, good afternoon, everyone. For PDG, we only have a few updates also. For overall updates, our year 2 has been fully approved fiscally and programmatically. So I think we'll be able to share what we plan to do for next year soon. And then we did, there was a PDGB5 annual convening last week. So this is a national convening that was held in Maryland. And we did have a group of people from Hawaii. So there's representatives from EOEL, P20, Hawaii Community College, and UH Center on Disabilities. So this is kind of a mixed group and try to represent from different parts of our PDG grant. So like our workforce and our evaluation and then some of the grant leads. And then, so I do have some updates for activities 3, 4, and 5. For activity 3, this is our maximizing parent and family engagement. We continue to work on a PDGB5 website. We are also was able to work with Hawaii County and the other counties to send 20 participants to Hawaii Island for their early childhood conference that they had earlier. I think it was actually late last month. And then it was in Kona Beach Hotel. And then for workforce, working with some of our partners there's a HCYC work group, apprenticeship work group that's receiving TA from a national support center, the Early Care and Education Pathways to Success. And so they've been an intermediary around apprenticeship programs and supporting different states. And then we also have the Hawaii Advancing Early Childhood Education Profession Initiative, which was just recently launched. This is in collaboration with UH and intentionally pursue excellence within the early childhood educator program. So you can go to the next slide. And then lastly, our activity around program quality improvement. We are able to work with HCYC again around, and so HCYC was able to send out a career lattice framework and which kind of takes the early childhood educators and standards and Emalama Keiki together, and they were sent it out for feedback. So maybe some of you were able to provide feedback to HCYC in some way, shape, or form. I think it happened earlier this month. So that's it for PDG. So maybe next time we'll be able to share what we're going to be doing in year 2, and then some of our closing activities that we were able to either complete or want to continue from year 1. Thank you.
Thank you, Lohi. And now for the early learning portion. So the one thing that I wanted to bring up now. So there were some questions about the opportunity for children to come to kindergarten. And so when we're looking at the pre-K expansion, I wanted to preface it first with the presentation that we did do at the P20 attainment goal. And you're going to hear from Mikako about this first look at this data. It's not an analysis of the data, and very similar to Lauren, it's the first time we've ever had it and taken a look at it. And as Mikako will explain, there's a lot of things to take a look that are going to be worked on after this. And so I would not kind of go down a rabbit hole into any one of these data pieces at this point in time, because you're going to actually hear why. But the reason why I'm prefacing this is because when we start to talk about the pre-K expansion pieces, there was a request to have some alignment with the roadmap. And so I just wanted to kind of start here so that we could just take a look at this, and then we're going to be reporting on some of the other expansion pieces as we go through some items as it correlates to the roadmap.
Okay, thank you, Yuko. So I'd like to share some data on the kindergarten preschool experience. This activity was related to Hawaii P20 Hawaii Attainment Goal, as you see on the screen. Goal 1, universal access to high quality early learning opportunity. Next slide, please. So we looked into DOE kindergarten's preschool experience. Information on preschool experience is collected on the kindergarten enrollment form, as you see on the screen. So this is the form that they have when you have to fill when you enter kindergarten. Next slide, please. The preschool information is also collected on the supplemental kindergarten enrollment form, as you see on the screen. The questions are asked a little bit differently on the two different forms here. Next slide, please. So first, we looked at how families responded to the forms. As you see, some families answered differently on the two forms. Some families did not respond on both forms, and some families answered on one but not on the other. So you can see the different responses on the two forms. Next slide, please. Next, we looked at kindergarten's preschool experience collected on the enrollment form by complex areas. So as you see, there are variation on the preschool experience, but also on the response rates. 4 complex areas had a low no response rate of 25% or less, and they are highlighted in green. So the highlighted ones had a high response rate. Next slide, please. So further, we took a closer look at the 4 complex areas with low no response rate. We looked at kindergarten's preschool experience by ethnicity, economically disadvantaged status, and English language learner status. So as you see briefly, as Yuko said, it's very limited data, so we don't want to interpret, but among the 4 complex area, Asian students, 83% of Asian students had preschool experience, and the lowest is 31% of Pacific Islanders had preschool experiences, and you see other groups there. Another thing that we looked at is by economic status, and one group is not economically disadvantaged, and the other is, and you can see the differences presented there. The last one we looked at was by English language learner status. So those who are not English language learner had 68% of them had a pre-K experience, where English language learner only had 38% of them had preschool experiences. So that's all. And then as we noted that the response rate was different by complex area and by groups. So we wanted to, I guess, start. And then there was mixed answer, as I showed in the earlier screen. So I think that's one thing that we have to kind of think about. And this is just the very beginning of this process. Thank you.
So thank you, Mikako, for taking a look at this. So at the last P20 council meeting, we did report on this very, very brand new first look at the kindergarten pre-K experience. And as you can see, when we're looking at 2 different forms, or we're looking at responses on different forms, and then also potentially low response rates. There's many things that we can start to have dialogue about. And so, as I had mentioned earlier, I think we just wanted to present the data just upfront, so that you can see it, because we've already presented this at the Hawaii P20 Council, and I wanted to make sure our board saw it. Especially because the kindergarten entry assessment was being presented today. But again, there's a lot to discuss. It's a first look at a first opportunity to try to collect the information. And so you can see the discrepancy in the data and the limited response at this point in time. So the first thing is that I'm very grateful that we have something and that we tried something. And now we know how we can try to move forward to improve the collection, so that we can get a clearer picture of what opportunities families are actually taking advantage of in Hawaii.
Carrie has a question.
Okay.
She wanted to know about asking only about EOEL, public pre-K and charter, and not community-based providers.
Oh, okay. So thank you for asking, Carrie. On the kindergarten, let's see if I can present this. On the kindergarten enrollment form, so this left side pulls out the small portion that's actually down here on the bottom of the form. And so on the kindergarten enrollment form, it says, did your child attend, yes or no? Was it less than 6 months, between 6 and 12 months, more than 1 year? And was it EOEL or charter? And it does not ask about other programs. So therefore the supplemental form came in. And so this is where the people who responded sometimes entered the program name and location. Sometimes the dates were not completed. So there's a lot more conversation that needs to be had about the data collection method, but we just wanted to show it to you to see what has been collected for this initial first year.
Thank you.
Okay. Thank you. And so this was just to kind of give a place and a setting for the next portion, because we are talking about expansion and what is the purpose of expansion if all children were already attending, early learning opportunities and experiences. But I think that this kind of comes back to our roadmap and talking about how shall we implement Act 46. And so I decided to organize this expansion space in relationship to the roadmap. And so I'm going to have Ian speak first about the action item number 1, which is about workforce development and support.
Thank you, Yuko. So some updates in terms of workforce development and support. The Early Childhood Educator Stipend Program for the spring the application is closed on December 1st, and so they're currently being processed. Actually, the Early Childhood Stipend team is here, and from just an initial pass, that seems that there's been a significant increase in applicants, which is good news. And another kind of exciting update is that we have looked at stipend awards now being able to be used toward prior learning credit options, which actually at this point are only being offered through HONCC, but those include credit by exam as well as a portfolio-based assessment. And so we're looking to have opportunities for those options to be available at other community colleges. Building off of what Alohi shared regarding the Early Care and Education Pathways to Success group, ESEPs, we're currently planning for a February visit by the Executive Director, Randy Wolf, and her team to present and share their apprenticeship program model and opportunities. And so more information will be coming out very shortly, as we kind of finalize that.
Thank you, Ian.
Yep.
The other thing I wanted to highlight is that the Hawaii Teacher Standards Board has formed the work group. And the purpose of this work group is to review Hawaii Teacher State Standards Board licensure criteria and ECE license field and levels. And here are the people who are a part of this workforce team. We've had 2 meetings so far, and we're taking a look at national ECE 1, 2, and 3 criteria. We're also looking at other mechanisms for licensure within Hawaii and also beyond Hawaii, and just having a really good rich dialogue. And I'm really appreciating the people who are part of this group. The new business item says this, that we are going to look at whether the Hawaii Teacher Standards Board should revise or replace current licensure requirements for ECE to include new or alternative or revised pathways. Whether we should accept things such as national board certification for the early childhood generalist and exceptional needs, or that should the Hawaii Teacher Standards Board make no changes. The other thing that we're looking at is that should the Hawaii Teacher Standards Board add another ECE license level that would consider the birth through 8 to align with some of the work that the universities are coming up with in terms of expanding their pathways to early care and education. And so we've met twice. We're going to reconvene again in January. So action item number 2 is addressing facilities for early care and education programs. And I'm choosing to highlight these 2 spaces right here. So the School Facilities Authority is currently renovating spaces that are part of the next cohort of 44 schools. And so you can see all of the schools here, and these are the initial sites. And I actually have firm deadlines of when their renovations are going to be slated to complete. The only one of these schools that are going to be opening in January is actually Nanakuli Elementary School. And that was a request of the principal and the school community because they have a wait list and they don't want to lose parents who are on the wait list, and they want to get them in to their site as soon as possible. So Nanakuli will be the only site that's going to open up in January. And although the facility renovations are completed ahead of next school year, the rest of the sites are all going to be opening next school year. Another facilities piece that I wanted to highlight is that the Honolulu City and County of Honolulu shared at a recent Ready Keiki meeting that they are starting to include plans to include early learning spaces within the footprints of some of their future projects. And I think that this poses a really great opportunity for community-based providers because we know that space is always a challenge.
Are those spaces that private providers could?
Sorry, yes.
Okay.
Yes. And then I also wanted to highlight that on December 6th, there was a blessing ceremony for the Bezos Academy Preschool in Lahaina. And I'm going to just kind of close this out real quick because I have some notes down here on this. So this school component is projected to open in 2025. It's Montessori inspired. It will be full day programming year round. They will have 2 classrooms with room for 40 children, ages 3 to 5. And the partner is providing the space rent free, and they're going to cover all of the costs for the operation of the school. And going along with what was presented earlier for the child and adult care food program, this space will offer breakfast, lunch, snack, and also a take-home dinner for these families. And eligible families will be able to go up to 400% of the federal poverty level, which is about 120,000 per year for a family of 4 with children ages 3 and 4. And those are the folks who will be eligible to apply. And so this is something when we're looking at facilities for early care and education programs, this is one that's going to be coming up on Maui. Action item number 3 is funding for the early care and education system. And in this space, I really wanted to highlight the notice of proposed rulemaking for Head Start. And this has, okay, let me just. So the proposed changes fall under workforce supports, mental health, and quality improvements. And so there are numerous policy goals, numerous in this notice of proposed rulemaking. And I cannot, we are not permitted to speak to anything that's in there, but you can kind of take a look at it and go to the site, and I have a QR code for it after this, but I just wanted to highlight. So they're going to propose to promote wages that reflect the value of Head Start staff, to include comparable wages of public school settings in their geographic area, to strengthen benefits for the Head Start staff, to strengthen the health and well-being, to integrate mental health into aspects of the program service delivery, to have high quality individualized family services, and they're talking about reasonable workloads as well, responsive and high quality services for expectant families. They want to streamline the community assessment, address barriers to enrollment and attendance, better identify families who are in poverty and eligible, promote child health and safety, clarify expectations for service duration and ratios, and also improve their communication about Head Start programs. So there's a lot that is in this notice of proposed rulemaking. And so they do want to hear from you. So this QR code here will take you to the Head Start site that they call ECLEC, but you know, if you can't find it, just let me know and I can help you get there. And so you can take a look at it, and they're inviting and encouraging public comments until January 19th of 2024. And again, a lot of this is looking at how do we utilize funding for the early care and education system and also appropriately compensate the workforce. And then under action item number 4, to address program quality and improvement and maintenance, I don't know, Jordina, would you like to highlight the continuous quality improvement framework?
Sure. So Harry Locke with UH is going to be leading some of the CQI efforts. EOEL is helping with planning and logistics support. So as a follow-up to the last update at the last ELB meeting, we do have a meeting next week. So EOEL, DHS, DOH McBee, UH, and some folks from HCYC will be convening together. So DOH McBee, Jeremy, has agreed to share out with the group some information on McBee CQITA requirements that have been embedded into their federal mandates. So he has agreed to provide some lessons learned and overview of how they've done it, what they've done it. And then I believe the next steps from there will be a discussion on some of the work underway through HCYC and other groups, and identifying some next steps for us to consider in the development of the CQI. This is embedded in the PDG grant. So yeah, that's the update we have. That the first preliminary meeting will be, we have it scheduled for next week.
Thank you, Jordina. And then I just wanted to end on a happy note from Tara. So Tara, do you want to speak to this? Oh, you can't unmute. So you go. Oh, okay. Okay. Well, let me go ahead. Okay. So Tara was able to attend the backpack distribution at Lincoln Elementary School. And we also have, I believe, 4 other backpack distributions that are coming up. So Tara said that she was able to attend this event, of course, with Lieutenant Governor and some area legislators. There were parents and some other community members who were present. There were some reading of books and conversations with the children. And I guess, Tara, maybe you can talk a little loud from where you are about just something that you noticed.
Oh, it was a great experience. I won't unmute my own. It was a really great experience. It was the first Ready Kiki event that I was personally able to attend, and But what really impressed me was how the kids were so happy and so receptive. They were very well behaved, which was amazing. And it was a great event. They did great. The classroom was great, and got to meet the principal, and it was a wonderful event. There'll be more events next week as well too, at other schools. But without speaking for, you know, the Ready K2 program, the backpacks and the materials inside, there's some books and a blanket and some other things they were donated. But the kids were so excited, and it was great. They were supposed to be distributed in August, I believe, but because of the wildfires, it was put off until Christmas now. So just something, a very happy note, with everything else going on. It was really great to see them smiling and having fun and just enjoying being kids.
Thank you, Tara. And that's the end of our updates.
Do any board members have questions or comments for Yuko about the updates, or staff members? Well, I will thank you for making the connection to the roadmap. It's nice to see how the roadmap relates to the expansion process that we've had, and that it's functioning in the categories we had hoped it would be. The work that we submitted. Thank you. All right, if there are no questions or comments, we can move to the governance subcommittee report, and we have action to take here. Matt, I'm going to turn it over to you.
Hi, Bob. Thank you. I'm going to share my screen. Oh, Kevin, can you allow me to share my screen? Thank you.
Okay, go ahead, Matt.
Thank you very much. Okay, hi, everybody. The governance subcommittee met on Friday, November 7th. At that time, we had not received any input from any ELB board members. So in preparation for today's meeting and vote, we prepared the annual evaluation for the EOEL director. You all had received this, the draft version back in November, and we only made one change to that, and that was in section 1.2 under building strong relationships with private entities. The support for accreditation efforts, Dana Luca recommended changing this to coordinating with DHS childcare regulation program, who actually has the responsibility of accreditation efforts. And then EOEL's responsibility would be to just help offer assistance where needed and helping to address barriers that were impeding the process. So that's the measure for building strong relationships. So I am going to make a motion that the board approves this current version of the EOEL director evaluation process for July 1st, 2023 to June 30th, 2024.
All right, motion has been made. Is there a second?
I'll second. This is Carrie.
Thanks, Carrie. Motion is made and seconded to approve the director's evaluation goals as provided in the document. Is there any discussion? Hearing none, we'll move to take a vote on the approval of the evaluation goals as presented in the document by this governance subcommittee. I assume Justina's still not here. And Aaron is gone, Coyote had to leave, Megan,
Still here. Thank you.
did you, I'm sorry, I couldn't hear you.
Sorry, vote yes.
Okay, thank you. Ann is not here, May,
Aye.
thank you, I vote aye, now pull up,
Got disconnected.
Sheila,
She got disconnected.
oh, okay. Mari,
Hi.
Carrie,
Aye.
Melody,
Aye.
okay, the motion has been approved, even though we've had people step away, we still have a quorum. So thank you to the governance subcommittee, we can move forward with these goals. Matt, any final comments you want to make before we?
Yes, thanks, Bob. We did receive some input and questions or suggestions from a couple board members after the subcommittee met. So I will bring those up to the subcommittee when we meet tomorrow, and we'll discuss that input, and if necessary, we will present any updates to the board in the next at the next meeting.
All right, thank you, Matt.
Thanks, Bob.
And thank you to the committee for work in getting these goals put together. All right, we have an opportunity now for any Maui updates that anyone might have. And I do have one to share with you from Erin, who wasn't able to be at this meeting. And her message is, I wanted to share that the Home Visiting Services Unit acted swiftly to add Lahaina as a service area, and Keiki o Ka'aina has begun services. The Koka site has enrolled 12 Lahaina families, with 4 intakes scheduled for next week. So that's an update from Erin Henderson. Are there any other board member updates?
Bob, I would just share from an early intervention perspective, and Matt, chime in if I miss anything. As early intervention is doing a really great job of providing telehealth services to the families that are displaced, and wanting to make sure that they reach all of their families that are living in different locations, not just on Maui, but also on neighbor islands and Oahu.
Any other board member updates? All right, hearing none, are there any public member updates around Maui? And then we'll move into the public comment portion of the meeting. I don't see anything in the chat, so we will open up the floor for public comment. A reminder that there's a 2-minute time limit per speaker, and comments need to be related to agenda items listed. This would now be the opportunity for the public individual earlier who wished to make a comment. Anything? I don't see anything. Okay. I see nothing in the chat indicating that someone has something to say. And here now, public members, so we will continue to item number 10, which is the member updates. Are there member updates? Now, I have one that I will offer. At the recent HIS Schools of the Future conference, the Samuel N. and Mary Castle Foundation sponsored a dinner meeting for early childhood stakeholders and program directors from HIS in the private sector. The purpose of the evening was really to focus on a conversation about the current early childhood educational landscape, particularly with respect to the expansion of public pre-K and the workforce issues that have erupted. The keynote speaker for that dinner was Dr. Stephen Barnett, who is the senior co-director of NEAR, the National Institute for Early Education Research, which is centered at Rutgers University. Dr. Barnett was asked to give us a sense of what has been learned and what insights might he have to share with us with regard to public pre-K expansion in other states beyond Hawaii, and what we might be considering in our own state as we consider the changing landscape. Dr. Barnett basically shared that it was mostly a public-private mixed delivery system statewide, and that one of the things that could be learned is that there may be the ways in which the private sector could partner with the public sector. He also indicated quite clearly that population shifts indicate that birth rates are declining, and so that enrollment issues are going to be existing in the future. He urged us here in Hawaii to consider the opportunities for expansion of POD, to continue to work in that area, because that is a vehicle, obviously, for private school expansion, to look at ways that we might consider partnering with the business community or offering opportunities for the business community, the corporate world, to either through tax relief or other ways to incentivize their engagement and support. He recommended that obviously we explore ways to increase wages and compensation along with benefits for the workforce, and look at a variety of different ways we might explore expansion of the workforce. And urged the private sector particularly to look at what were the unique features that provided a value added factor that the public sector could not offer by virtue of their nature and the restrictions in terms of what they could offer. And those were some of the key issues that he shared that we might be considering. We then had an open discussion at tables over dessert. And it was a lively conversation at most of the tables. Some of it a little bit irreverent, but that's always a good thing to get off one's system. And what really came out of that was an indication that the people who were there, and there were about 45 different institutions represented, really were looking forward, and from the private sector, for opportunities of that type to be able to talk together, to be able to share the situation. For some, it was an enlightening experience. They weren't aware of some of the situation. And we concluded the evening with a panel, some of whom are our own board members, asking for local expertise to give insights about how were various groups in the community thinking about the changing landscape and dealing with the reality that's presented. And the responses, we had Melody Vega was on the panel, Megan McCorriston, Christina Cox was on the panel, Terry Locke, and Mandy Fronis Brown, who is the assistant superintendent of the Catholic school, served on the panel. And the variety of responses there, I think, were really helpful and enlightening to the group. Talking about things like looking at, first of all, working together as a group, private sector schools. There were suggestions around revisiting the possibility of greater public funding. There were suggestions for pursuing POD, strong suggestions to sit down and really do some serious 2 to 3 year strategic planning so that we're ready for what's happening in the future. Looking at, do we need to broaden the targeted audiences we seek to bring into our communities? Do we need to look at perhaps changing in some ways some of the mission and vision that we have in response? Do we need to expand the age range for whom we provide services? And how can we, as a sector, support the growth and development of the workforce that's needed? So those were some of the general issues that came out of the panel discussion. It was a very fruitful evening. People left feeling that they had had an opportunity to not only learn, but to share some of their own worries about the private sector. And it really supported, I think, a comment that Steve Barnett also emphasized in his presentation, and that is that the goal of expansion of Act 46 cannot be achieved without the private sector, that the private sector is key. And there was a strong recommendation to consider that choice is something we value here in Hawaii, and that there is a place for the private sector amongst those who are out, families who are out there looking for settings for their children. And so I think it was a fruitful conversation, and we are now at HAIS looking to say, how do we use what we learned here to communicate more broadly what we've learned from the private sector and its views, and how can we bring the private sector together to advocate more strongly as a sector for its role and to engage more broadly in the community and not limit ourselves to the communities that we serve. So I wanted to thank everyone who joined us that evening, but especially the panelists who provided the reality that we needed to hear. That was particularly helpful. And it also was a role that HAIS has not played as significantly in convening the broader private sector. So that, I think, was a plus. And we learned that we can do that frequently. Now that's my member update as the designee for HAIS. Are there any other member updates? All right, I don't see any and don't hear anyone stepping forward. So I'm going to ask Carrie if she would leave us with some good words. And before she does that, I want to wish you all a happy holiday season. Hope that we come back to a world that's a little more settled in 2024. And that all of you find some time to take care of yourself over this holiday break. So Carrie, what good thoughts do you have for us?
Bob, I thought I would do something a little bit different and share a video. And this is also to honor you and your love of Christmas trees. But this is Baby Liv, and if you didn't see her yesterday, she was all over the news of first time seeing a Christmas tree. Hopefully you can hear it. Let's see. Wow. Okay.
Nothing more needs to be said, right?
Exactly. So happy holidays.
Happy holidays, everyone. Thank you.
Thanks. Happy holidays. Bye.
Aloha.